Welcome to Starborn Saga. Get ready to witness humanity's greatest secrets unfold. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments and keep up with our latest stories. Vorex Thul, a captain aboard the Imperial vessel, Eternal Dominance's observation deck, watched as his four upper arms were clasped together as the planetary system joined the Galactic Empire. Behind his back, with his ceremonial blade's hilt resting on his two lower appendages, not that the blade was just to demonstrate. Each of the notches on its handle, 57 to be exact, symbolized one of his high-ranking opponents who had challenged him and died. Lieutenant Mirazak's voice interrupted his moment of self-praise as the commander arrived, stating that the conquering of Sector 39B is finished, encountered very little resistance, and the Vorex didn't turn, so why bother? If there were any casualties on our end, the 3 drones that were damaged during the orbital, nothing that cannot be corrected in a rotation cycle may be bombarded. Bored Vorex finally, he mumbled as he turned his enormous body towards his subordinate, his scarlet exoskeleton. Is there nothing in this galaxy that gleams beneath the artificial lights, polished to perfection as befits his status, that may now offer a respectable challenge? As we have defeated 87 sentient, not a single species survived more than 2 typical cycles throughout the previous solar revolution. In contrast to our Lieutenant Zak of the military moved uneasily, and her emerald scales appeared to lighten a little under his eyes. That's fantastic to hear, Commander. With every victory, the Empire gets stronger. Without effort, it's like eating without flavor, Vorex remarked, his jaws clicking. It's annoying that I haven't used my real battle blade in 7 revolutions. Do you realize how that saps a warrior's spirit? Lieutenant, it turns into Commander, Zak said. Yes, it's soft and flabby like the underside of a Gorthan slug. Naturally, even if Vorex could sense her lack of interest, she wouldn't recognize that Lieutenant Zak was a tactical officer rather than a D3 Metator warrior. Vorex moved to the center holodisplay. He flicked his top right claw, creating a shadow across the galaxy map. What's this unmarked system here? He inquired as he zoomed into the next target region. Zak checked her datapad system and pointed to a small solar system on the edge of the Empire's expanding zone. XJ2718, unremarkable planets. Only one supporting life. Preliminary scans reveal a mid-stage atomic period, growing civilization, technological level, no notable Imperial scouts. Classified space travel skills as a modest acquisition. Vorex grunted and sent in the regular invading fleet for another dull conquest. We'll stay here, and the commander used his distinctive voice to stop Admiral Krell from accessing the observation deck. The ancient warrior's battle-scarred exoskeleton and missing left eye gave way to thunderous footfalls. Vorex privately admired the air of earned respect he exuded, and we've heard strange rumors regarding the system. Now this was intriguing. Unexpected reports were uncommon in the systematic growth of the Empire. What reports? Vorex demanded, and his momentary disinterest narrowed by Admiral Krell's one eye. The planet is known as Earth by its the first scout ship we deployed 3 lunar cycles ago has ceased to exist. The inhabitants are species that identify as humans. Vorex chuckled as he heard a scout ship losing its way deep within his thorax. I wish I were a primitive with atomic technology. Admiral, tell me you're trying to be funny. We sent a follow-up, but Krell's gruff voice showed no signs of amusement. Before we lost, the reconnaissance drone broadcast for around 7 minutes. Contact now. Vorex showed me the video since he was truly interested. Admiral Krell nodded to Lieutenant Zak, who promptly displayed the drone's last transmission on the holographic screen that the 3 officers were observing. Earth's discovery, silently as the drone circled the blue-green planet in the video. As the drone swooped down, it revealed a verdant planet with enormous oceans and continental landmasses. The ambience, it took pictures of enormous urban transit systems, and facilities for producing energy, all of which are very typical for a developing civilization. Fast forward to the last minutes after Krell gave the order. The video cut forward to reveal the drone hovering over what looked to be a military installation. Workers in uniform were pointing at the drone, but Vorex couldn't understand their facial expressions because they had never cared to research the emotional displays of primitive species. But they have observed Vorex unnecessary scrutiny. But these firearms appeared so archaic that there's no way one of the people on the television appeared to be holding a portable gadget. Was a quick flash, and then the video cut off, leaving the observation deck in silence. Vorex eventually stated that a portable weapon defeating an Imperial Admiral Krell wearing military-grade shielding maintained a somber countenance. According to the scientific division's analysis of the few information we have, these people may have created technology along non-traditional lines, which means they deviate from the norm. Other species that we have seen exhibit a pattern of technical progress, whereby they seem to excel in particular areas while being primitive in other people's eyes. Made Vorex feel something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Sincere enthusiasm. You're expressing that they could potentially pose a challenge. I'm stating that we should go cautiously, Krell said. The Emperor has personally become involved in this matter. From a diplomatic standpoint, wants you to be the leader of the invading force over X's mandibles, which are finally spreading in what appears to be a smile among his species. I'll take a small elite force, so get my battlecruiser ready for some serious combat. Krell cautioned that this is not a typical invading fleet, commander. Gladiatorial combat is still a part of our Imperial conquests. Vorex waved a contemptuous claw. Yes, protocols. I want to be on the front lines and meet these people, but we will bring the usual invasion fleet. Commander Krell bowed slightly and murmured, "Me as you wish." But Vorex could. Lieutenant Zack approached after the Admiral left, sensing his disdain. "Dear Commander, if I may, the evidence indicates that these people have a disproportionately high tendency to use violence against each other. Their past is replete with ongoing conflict." Vorex responded, "All the better," expressing his delight at developing a species that has refined its fighting abilities via internal Zack. "I didn't mean to imply that conflict frequently offers the most amusing resistance. According to their psychological profile, they are erratic and don't give up while they keep battling in spite of the overwhelming odds, and defeat is inevitable." Vorex turned to his lieutenant, staring at her with all four of his eyes. You're saying that Commander Vorex Thul, the Imperial Army's unbeaten champion, should be worried about going up against archaic people who haven't even accomplished legitimate space travel?" Zack quickly retracted his statement, saying, "No, Commander, of course not. I just believed the data was pertinent to our strategy. My blade is all I need to use as a tactical weapon against Vorex, their most formidable warrior. Said that defeating their champion in front of their people is the true way to conquer a species. It breaks their yes, Commander," Zack said, "spirit far more effectively than any orbital bombardment." Knowing better than to continue the argument, Vorex spent the next few days engrossed in what little he examined the data that Empire had collected on people and found their physical prowess to be woefully lacking. Their endurance was relatively astounding when compared to his own species, but it wasn't a major problem. The challenge of humans, even though the odd portable item from the drone footage was still there, its weaponry technology was outdated. The invasion armada somehow gathered 20 warships, each transporting hundreds of thousands of Imperial soldiers, and attack ships are too much for one planet of primitives. But as the fleet readied, protocol required overwhelming force. Vorex found himself on the bridge of his personal battle in order to reach hyperspace for the brief flight to Earth. His communications operator cried out, "We are receiving a cruiser. Glorious victory, Commander." Vorex's antenna twitched in surprise as they sent from the human world, asking how they shouldn't know the communication frequency. "Sir, yet the signal is unquestionably coming from Earth, and it's expressly aimed at our fleet." So ordered. His interest was piqued as the primary view screen came to life, revealing a person. The male monster had insignia that Vorex believed indicated status and was dressed in some kind of clothing. "Accomplishments, attention to the alien fleet," the human stated in a cool, collected tone. "This is United Earth Defense Force General Thomas Barrett. We have noticed your approach and comprehend your goals before deciding on a plan of action. We encourage you to send a..." The sound reverberated over the bridge, and Vorex couldn't help but laugh. "They want to meet with a representative to discuss terms. Talk about the ridiculousness of these beings if I end." The Vorex responded amusedly when the communications officer and transmission commander said, No. He moved forward so that the human could see him clearly. "This is Commander. Let's hear what these primitives have to say." There are no words to describe Vorex Thul of the Galactic Imperial forces. "The Empire will take over your planet, and your resistance will lead to your demise." Barrett, the human general, displayed no signs of fright or terror. In fact, if Vorex was, according to the accurate interpretation of the alien's facial expression, the commander looked nearly bored. Thul gave a level response, saying, "We recognize your viewpoint, but we think there has been a misconception regarding Earth's capabilities. We would like to prevent needless confrontation if you are as assured as you seem. Maybe you'd agree to a demonstration." Or Vorex's attention was definitely piqued. "What sort of demonstration is your best? A controlled confrontation?" Warrior versus us in a skill and strength test that doesn't put either of our armies at risk. Speaking Vorex's language now was an unnecessary opportunity to confront there for the champion. It was precisely what he had hoped for, and if my warrior prevails, Vorex will talk about surrender after he is asked, knowing that he will be that fighter. Vorex responded, and if our warrior prevails, you pull out your fleet, and Vorex was unable to acknowledge Earth as a sovereign territory that was off limits to the Empire. You really think your champion could defeat an Imperial holdback? Your laughter, Barnett's expression. Warrior, our weakest soldier, could take over your entire planet by himself. Commander Vorex, if you stayed impartial, you have nothing to lose. Although this wasn't typical procedure at the time, the Emperor had granted him a great deal of discretion in dealing with this. Unexpected circumstances and the possibility of direct fight were too alluring to deny. So Vorex said, I accept. I will personally take on your champion in your challenge. Barrett smiled a little for the first time, which was great. And we shall. You might bring a modest security device to communicate coordinates for a neutral place. The gearbox ended, and we will be expecting you in 12 hours. Standing on the bridge, Vorex is already envisioning his dazzling triumph. Admiral Commander Krell, who had been watching quietly, moved forward. This is extremely personal conflict with Native Americans is not part of the irregular first contact and conquest processes. Alexis Yuri's introduction, Vorex responded dismissively. Species, the Emperor granted me leeway in this subject. And what better way to show our dominance by defeating their champion, who will then give up without a struggle, will help save time and resources. And if you lose? Krell asked with his mandibles clicking in. Vorex pointedly turned all four of his eyes on the Admiral. Hey Admiral, I haven't lost a battle in 300 revolutions, and I'm not going to start now. A primitive species that continues to use fossil fuels didn't make any more arguments. However, 12 hours later, Vorex's personal shuttle made it clear that he disapproved. Dropped through the atmosphere of Earth in the direction of the coordinates that the humans he had brought Lieutenant Zax had given him. The landing place was a flat, and a group of 10 elite guards provided more than enough security for this short trip. An open space encircled by mountains is ideal for fighting because there are no adjacent structures or civilians. When the shuttle landed, Vorex noticed a small gathering of people standing next to it, waiting a few hundred meters away. Remember, Vorex told his guards, as the shuttle's ramp descended, their own transport vehicles. No matter what happens, no one interferes in the combat. This is between me and their champion. The Earth Aries struck his senses as he entered the Oxford-rich, slightly humid, and completely breathable planet's surface. Without help, Vorex took a while to get used to the slightly higher gravity. Nothing that would substantially impact his performance compared to the Imperial standard. The human delegation, General Barrett, led the way, and Vorex saw a stranger walking alongside him. Must be their champion. Even matter the fact that the human was smaller than Barrett and had no long hair was one of the physical attributes Vorex had anticipated from a fighter. Tied back and wore plain black clothes instead of military gear or armor. Thul Barrett, the uniform commander, publicly welcomed him and thanked him for agreeing to during this encounter. Vorex dwarfed the humans with his 3-meter frame, making them appear like infants. General, please present your champion, so that we can move on. Barnett gestured to the smaller human. Alexis Yuri, Earth's representative for this contest. Vorex is standing next to him, looked incredulously at the human before bursting into a laugh that reverberated off the nearby mountains. This is your champion. Is this little thing a joke? Alexis is a human, gazed up at him, but Vorex couldn't quite make out what was on his face. Commander Barnett inquired naively. Amusement, is there a problem? I anticipated your. Vorex responded, still laughing. Strongest warrior. Not whatever this is. Alexis said in a startlingly firm voice for the first time. I am exactly what you asked for, Commander Earth's. Vorex turned to Lieutenant Zack and said, scan this representative in this contest. Beast, there has to be a trick involved. Zack quickly scanned the area with her handheld readings from the instrument reveal. A regular human biology commander with no hidden or enhanced weaponry. Vorex looked back at the odd energy traces. People's laughter turning to annoyance. If this is your notion of ascending a helpless opponent to beg for pity, won't work. But I'll still assert triumph. Commander Barrett, and your planet will continue to be a member of the Empire. Told him that Alexis is our designated representative and that the conditions will stay the same. Talked about surrendering if you win, and withdrawing if Alexis wins. The mandibles of your fleet Norix clicked in frustration. This wasn't the magnificent he had been expecting, that fighting this little human would not honor him, but he was determined now. And he growling, the two groups advanced to the middle of the stage so that we could continue our charade. The person appeared fully in the flat region that formed a rough circle around Vorex and Alexis, serenely extending her limbs as though she were getting ready for a simple workout instead of fighting the empires. The battle begins. Barrett declared the combat would continue until the greatest warrior said, "The rules are simple. One member gives up or becomes unable of continuing. There is no outside intervention." Vorex took away his ceremonial blade and all weapons except the ones you were born with from gave it to Lieutenant Zach, who wouldn't need it anyhow because of his race. Claws, a natural weapon. If both contestants are prepared, strong limbs and an exoskeleton with armor would be more than enough. Barnett queried Alexis, who nodded silently. Vorex curtly replied, "Yes," gesture, after which Barrett announced moving aside to join the onlookers. Vorex assumed a fighting position, raising his forearms in the customary way of an Imperial warrior, but Alexis just stood, observing him with their hands at her sides, saying, "I will try not to kill you too quickly," with a sardonic tone. Vorex stated, "Your folks should have time to observe their champion's loss." Alexis said, cocking her head slightly, "Will you talk all day, or will we do anything else?" This Vorex became enraged by the nonchalant disregard and roared as he lunged. His upper right arm swung forward in a strong arc, striking the person's head with a strike that, should what transpired next, would permanently alter Commander Vorex Thul's perception of incapacitate without killing. Despite Vorex's powerful strike, hitting nothing but air, the human had pushed the cosmos. Incredibly quick sidestepping his attack with such smooth elegance that Vorex briefly believed he might have completely imagined her existence. But she was actually standing there, calmly 2 meters to his left. Hands remained at her sides. Alexis remarked on her tone in an intriguing manner, casually, as though talking about the weather. Vorex's compound eyes blinked in bewilderment. No creature had hitherto avoided his blow. It must have been luck. "Stand steady and face me correctly. Pure, simple luck," he said. This time, Alexis raised an eyebrow and clicked agitatedly, asking, "Why would I do that?" In a sophisticated strike pattern, Vorex used all 4 of his limbs to crush innumerable opponents. Across his limbs moved in unison with 3 galaxies, generating an unavoidable net of impacting surfaces directed at various body parts. Alexis moved once more, but this time Vorex seen it, or at least he saw her move. She didn't simply avoid him, rather she ducked around his blows like water. The commander staggered forward around stones, never where his claws anticipated her to be, always just out of reach. He was knocked off balance by the force of his own attack, but he recovered fast and spun around. "To what trickery is this?" he asked, turning to face the person suddenly standing behind him with sincere perplexity in his tone. Alexis shrugged and said, "No tricks, just movement." Lieutenant Zach was gawking at the scene while feverishly documenting everything on her data pad. "Commander notified that our sensors are having trouble following the motion patterns of the person. There seems to be some," Vorex growled, indicating an irregularity in the measurements that he could tell without the need of technology. What was going on was that this guy was faster than any opponent he had ever encountered. But speed by itself wouldn't. Vorex placed his feet firmly and waited, observing the strategies she was using to change human carefully. And when she didn't attack, he said, "You can't win by simply avoiding me," he added. "You have to hit me eventually." Alexis answered, "You must." She has a tiny smirk on the corners of her lips. "But it seems like you're becoming very irritated with the avoiding part." She was correct, and that insight only strengthened Vorex's. He surged ahead in rage, his bellow resonating off the nearby mountains. This time, Alexis moved, eschewing technique in favor of sheer might and speed. Rather than just evading the strike, something else occurred. Her hand sprang out and struck Vorex's forearm. It was a slight touch, hardly noticeable, yet all of a sudden Vorex was in the air, and the world whirled around him. Before he fell onto his back with jarring force, the earth mountains blended together, sending up a mist of. For a few seconds, Vorex was unable to comprehend the impact's dust. How could this little creature defy gravity by throwing his 300 kilograms body through the air? He groaned as he forced himself to look at every physical law he understood. What was? Alexis asked, standing a few meters away in the same easy stance as though she hadn't moved at all. That he gasped, his translator struggling to convey his shock. That, from the sidelines, General Barrett called Ado, one of the many changing the roles martial arts forms. Vorex said again, "Martial arts." As Barrett recounted with obvious pleasure how he regained his footing in fighting systems. Now, humanity have evolved countless of fighting techniques throughout history. Here is Alexis, skilled in dozens of things, but dozens of Vorex couldn't imagine it, despite creating a wide variety of fighting techniques. The Imperial combat style was uniform throughout Empire 1 ideal technique that has been scientifically enhanced for effectiveness and is prepared to. Vorex came closer as Alexis asked, bouncing a little on her toes. This time, he circled the person carefully, searching for any weaknesses. She just pivoted in place while telegraphing bogus attacks to see how she would respond. When he attacked, her eyes, those odd single-lens eyes, watched him with unsettling attention. Once more, his upper left arm darted forward precisely rather than with force, as his lower right aimed for her legs during a battle. Alexis leaped not aside, but using his own velocity. She grabbed his upper arm and sailed towards him, sailing over his lower strike, twisted, and all of a sudden Vorex was staring up at the sky once more, his arm painfully frozen in place. This one's called Alexis described jujitsu in a conversational manner, using just enough force to inflict discomfort without causing harm. It all comes down to leverage, and what's great about it is that it doesn't matter how. Vorex broke with a frantic heave, demonstrating how strong you are when the odds are against you. This was impossible, free scrambling away from the person. He couldn't be losing because he was Commander Vorex Thul, the Imperial Force's unbeaten champion. Lieutenant Zax, this little monster from a backwater world, he growled. Zax's analysis is still recording everything, and the human answered quickly. Seems to be working against you, Commander, leveraging your own strength and momentum. Their tactics emphasize redirection rather than. Vorex snapped. That much is evident, as opposed to frontal disagreement. How do I oppose it? Alexis interrupted Zack before he could reply, saying, "You know, it's normally." Her tone was almost light, which is considered bad form when asking for counsel during a battle. Teasing, "But since this is new to you, I'll give you a tip. Don't try to dominate me, it won't work." With a yell that sparked something primordial in Vorex's warrior mentality, the total lack of respect or fear, he dropped all pretense of strategy and threw himself at the human, all 6 of them, making even his own guards recoil. Legs spread their claws, baring their mandibles wide, and then everything was a blur. With agony, Vorex experienced himself being steered, diverted, and redirected through every attack he launched resulted in his being flung into the air in ways his body was never intended to move. The human hands appeared to be everywhere at once, either pinned or locked, finding pressure locations he was unaware of that took use of joints in his exoskeleton that even after one especially embarrassing toss that put him face down in the dirt. Vorex heard something he didn't know. To his bewildered guards, General Barrett explains, "What you are seeing is the difference between a warrior and with a culture of violence. Your commander is from a civilization that views fighting as a test. Humans are strong individuals from a planet where we have been attempting to murder one another in ever more creative ways. Throughout our history, we have fought to win rather than to prove ourselves." Vorex pushed himself up his exoskeleton, which was now shattered and covered in dust. His limbs were shaking from strain and the buildup of tiny injuries, and his breathing was difficult. Alexis was standing a few meters away from the injury, hardly exerting herself other than a little increase in her respiratory rate. How could Vorex inquire? "How is this?" in between gasps. It's probable that Alexis gave him careful thinking. "Do you prefer the philosophical or technical explanation?" Although theoretically it's physics, both. Vorex responded by attempting to regain part of his strength during the brief respite. In biology, she claimed that humans evolved on a planet with a high gravity with substantial environmental stresses. We are not as strong as many other species, but we have made up for it. With she pointed to the effectiveness, stamina, and flexibility of various martial arts. They are separated by space because people have been learning how to battle bigger and stronger for thousands of years. Opponents. Vorex became anxious as she took a step forward. "It's because we never stopped challenging ourselves that your empire conquers through," Alexis added philosophically, "powerful force that you anticipate to prevail. Therefore you don't adjust fast enough when something unexpected happens." Imperial loss. Vorex claimed that his dignity was more damaged than his body after defeating 87 species. Despite the fact that the Imperial troops are the strongest military in the galaxy, Alexis just gestured to his Vorex bruised, knew he should give up. Any sane person would acknowledge defeat at this juncture, but 300 triumphant revolutions had. With a burst of desperate energy, he lunged again, making failure unfathomable. Instead of rerouting or avoiding, Alexis confronted his charge directly by entering his protector fist, which made contact with a specific location on his thorax, just above a group of nerves that Vorex hadn't even the world became white with. Agony when Vorex's limbs clutched his nervous system upon realizing he was susceptible. System overtaken by the abrupt, focused trauma, he fell to the ground, totally immobilized, but fully. Alexis informed the appalled observers that he had suffered a conscious pressure point strike, will recover in roughly 5 minutes, and his position has not caused any long-term harm. Vorex saw Lieutenant Zack running towards him on the ground with a medical scanner in hand, and behind her, Admiral Krell was. It was difficult to convince the old warrior that the contest was finished, General, because of his look, which may have been one of calculation or concern. Barrett formally declared that Earth's champion had won. As planned, the Imperial fleet will leave Earth's orbit, and our planet will be acknowledged as an independent nation that is off-limits to the Admiral Krell, an Empire waiter, moved forward. This was not typical of the outcome of an Imperial conquest, is not determined by a single battle. We have thousands of soldiers and we could still occupy this planet with 20 warships. And Barnett's face remained unchanged. However, his posture changed. So you may try, Admiral, but think about this. If in hand-to-hand combat your best warrior can be defeated by one human, what do you believe our real military might be? Capable of sending a shiver through Vorex's paralyzed body? It was a query he was frightened to learn the drone's answer. Lieutenant Zack whispered softly, and her face began to light up. Our military drone was destroyed by a handheld device that wasn't even your cutting-edge technology. Was it standard? Barrett nodded slightly to ensure that there was no problem with the apparatus. For a long period, Special Admiral Krell remained mute, his lone glance flitting between the serene Alexis and the dead Vorex, and the determined General Barrett eventually said, "We will uphold the agreement, the fleet will depart, much to Vorex's astonishment, and I will personally notify the aware of this development." Alexis knelt next to Vorex as sensation returned to his limbs. He could see her face's tiny intricacies up close, the depth of her emotions in those foreign eyes, and the odd symmetry. Gently remarked, for what it's worth, of her features, "You fought well, you are courageous and strong, but they are insufficient against a foe that has dedicated their whole throughout evolutionary history." Vorex has been able to move his mandibles sufficiently to speak while battling entities that are stronger than himself. "What are you people?" Alexis grinned, but it wasn't a sarcastic grin. Rather, it was sincere and even compassionate. "Everything on our planet, including predators, illnesses, and even the ground itself, attempted to kill us. Are we survivors, commanders? Beneath our feet with volcanoes and earthquakes, and when those dangers weren't enough to keep us occupied, we engaged in combat with one another. Other resources for ideology or territory, sometimes just to determine who was more adept at combat." She rose when Vorex regained sufficient composure to sit. "Your empire spreads widely, capturing anything it encounters." She added, "Humans looking inward, we strive to become our best selves via every conflict, battle, and war." A fresh perspective. Lieutenant Zack assisted Vorex in getting to his feet, and his body ached in ways. But the duel is all merely preparation for the next test. It was his pride that he had not experienced since his early training days. Having sustained the most severe wound, he questioned, "Will you kill me now?" Alexis, recalling the punishment he had inflicted on innumerable vanquished adversaries, appeared truly taken aback by the "I'm defeated, it's the warrior's way, Barrett, why would we do that?" came forward. "But it wasn't our plan, Commander. Killing you would be useless. Much more valuable in life than a messenger. You'll go back to your empire and tell them about humans," Barrett clarified. "Regarding what transpired here today, that knowledge is considerably more valuable than your eventual demise as the Imperial." As the guards assisted Vorex in returning to their shuttle, he couldn't help but glance back at the tiny group of people, who weren't. They were merely observing, either rejoicing in their triumph or making fun of his failure. Commander Vorex Thul's odd, cunning eyes seemed to perceive more than they should have at that precise moment. The Imperial forces unbeaten. Champion realized something fundamental that the Empire had never experienced before. Yes, they had previously subdued weaker animals, but they had never encountered an opponent who might equal them or, worse, surpass them up to this point. "Lieutenant," he whispered softly as they closed the shuttle door to ensure that all of the footage from this encounter is saved. Commander Zack responded, unedited, astonished by the request. "Could you please explain?" As the shuttle took flight, Vorex watched the dwindling human figures beyond the viewport. They need to understand, he replied, since the Empire must know below. What we have discovered is that these humans are a distinct species, and if Admiral Krell, who had been listening in silence, nodded in accord, saying, "We are smart, we will leave them alone. We have already informed the fleet that we will be retreating to the outer system boundary." And Krell's lone eye remained fixated as the Emperor Vorex questioned, "What will you tell him?" On Vorex with surprising ferocity, the reality that we came across a species that might demolish us if provoked. Thus the best line of action is to create he won't like that. Vorex mentioned diplomatic connections instead of trying to conquer. No, Krell concurred, but he will dislike extinction as the shuttle does. Returned to the ship and started getting ready for the lengthy trip home. Vorex found himself standing at Anne, looking down from the observation glass at the blue-green planet below. It appeared so innocent from orbit, just another globe in a vast array of others. But now he understood. He claimed he now had a clearer understanding of what those early scout reports had been attempting to warn them about with regard to Lieutenant Zax. "Yes, Commander, I want everything available, but I'm not turning from the view." Zack hesitated before answering, "Sir, but I loaded facts about human culture, history, and society into my personal database." Why did Vorex turn at last, looking into her bewildered eyes with all four of his eyes? "Because I want to comprehend them, and I don't want to engage in combat with one in the centuries that followed." The Commander Vorex Thul's renown spread across the Empire, but not for the reasons he had initially planned. Renown not as the best fighter, but as the most astute leader who knew when to avoid conflict with the strategist, who transformed a single setback into the most important relationship for the Empire. And in the opulent meeting rooms among the battle trophies and conquest memorials that adorned the walls of the Imperial Palace, a plain black frame with a handwritten note from Earth on it. The greatest warrior is aware of its brief but important message, when power alone is insufficient. It was signed by Alexis Yuri,